The first problem on the study guide asks us to verify that a point lies on a line defined by, and then they give you an equation. Well, it's the same thing as if they asked determine whether a point is on a line. It's the same thing, just different words. And so basically all we're going to do is take our x value, which is -2, and we insert it or substitute it in for x. And we take the y value, which is 8, and we put that in for y, and we see if it does equal -13 or not. So what we do is rewrite the 5/2, but in place of x, we're going to put -2. Now I'm going to treat that -2 as a fraction so you can see the cross canceling. I'll rewrite that -2, and in place of y, 8 is the number, and that's what y was or is. And this should all equal -13. If it does, we say yes, that point is on the line. Well, let's do some cross-canceling here. 2 goes into -2, -1 time. So we multiply across, and we'll have our number there, which would be -5. So -5 is what we have here. When we multiply these two numbers, well, this is a negative times a negative, and so that ends up making a, negative times a positive ends up making a negative. And so we have -16, and it all equals -13. Well, these two numbers don't equal -13 when I add them together. Again, when you see the -5 minus 16, you could always change this to plus a negative. When you see the same sign, that tells us that we have to add those two numbers, not subtract. So that makes a -21, and that does not equal -13. So in this case, we would say, no, that point is not on that line. Well, taking a look at the next one, what we're asked to do is write an equation. Whenever we need to write an equation, we need to use that point-slope formula. But we need to make sure we have the slope. As we read the problem further, we see that it says the slope is 2, and it passes through this point. So we're going to use the point-slope formula. We've got the point, we know what the slope is, we're ready to solve. And so all we're going to do is substitute. Put the point in for y1 and x1, and the slope in for m. So again, 2, that number goes in place of the m. The -9 goes in place of x1. The 2 goes all the way over here in place of y1. So we go ahead and do that work, and when we do that, we rewrite what we've got. Y minus 2 equals the slope, which is 2, multiplied by x minus -9. So as I said before, you always want to change those minus negatives to plus positives. And then we'll also distribute that 2 over that addition. So when we do that, we've got this y minus 2 equals 2x plus 18. And then from there, we just have one final step. To get it in that slope-intercept form, we're just going to get y by itself. So here I need to add 2 to both sides. So when I do that, I've got a y, and it equals 2x plus 20. And there's the answer. So the next problem that you're going to end up seeing on the test, and that's on this study guide, is a problem where we have to find an equation again, or write another equation. But this time, we're not given the slope. We're given a series of points. So we don't need all these points. We only need 2 points. So first thing you're going to do is, when you see this problem, cross off the extra points. Doesn't matter which ones you cross off. All we need are 2. So I'm going to use this one, 1, 1, and I'm also going to use 3, 7. So 1 and 1 were x and y, 3 is x, y is 7. Next is we need to find the slope. See, we don't have the slope in this problem, so we're going to end up having to use that slope formula. So we got to take the y values and subtract them, and then the x values and subtract those. So the common mistake I was seeing on last week's test is people were subtracting the x and y. They were subtracting like 3 minus 7. That's not what we do. We take the y values, so those last numbers in the ordered pairs, these two numbers right here, the 1 and the 7, those are what we're subtracting. So let's write that down. This equals 1 minus 7. And then we subtract the x values, these numbers right here. So I started with this 1, so I need to start with this 1. So 1 minus 3. We do that work, and we get a negative number. Now here's another problem people are having is the signs. Really be careful there. That's negative 6 over negative 2, and that reduces down to a positive 3, not a negative. Two negatives make a positive. So now we know the slope, so now we can go back to that point slope formula. Remember, it goes y minus y1 equals the slope times by x minus x1. So we're just going to take one of the points. I'm going to take 3, 7, and I'm going to take the slope and put it into y1, m, and x1. So it goes y minus the 7 equals the slope, which is 3, times by x minus 3. So this 3 here was the 3 that went in for x1. The 3 for the slope goes in for m, and the 7 goes in place of y1. So now we're ready to distribute. We're going to distribute that 3 over the subtraction. And so we go ahead and do that work. And what's left over? Well, we still have this y minus 7 equals, and then we have 3x minus 9. So now we're ready to isolate the variable y by doing an opposite operation. That's a minus 7, so I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So once I've done that, I've got y equals, and then I've got 3x, and then a minus 2. I had to subtract because they were opposite in sign. The negative 9, the plus 7, opposite in sign makes minus 2. Well, we've got another problem here. We've got a problem where we have to write another equation, this time parallel to an equation that's given to us, and it passes through a given point. So let's take a look at this one. Here we're going to, since we're writing an equation that's parallel, we have to remember a rule with parallel lines. Parallel lines say that we use the same slope, so we need to find the slope that we have. The slope here is the number that's in front of x, but only when y is by itself. So here's the slope. M equals 2. But, again, I'm going to use the parallel slope, which is exactly the same number. So 2 is the number I'm using, and I'm using the point in that point slope formula. So parallel lines, again, that means the same slope for those parallel lines. It's a key thing that you have to remember. So we're substituting into, again, that y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So we go ahead and do that work, do that substitution. It goes this way. Y minus, and then we take the y value, which is 1, equals the slope, which is 2, times by x minus negative 3. Well, go ahead and do some work there. Anytime you see that minus negative, change that right away to plus positive and distribute that 2 over that addition. Well, we go ahead and do that. We've got this y minus 1 equals 2x plus 6. So from that point, we need to isolate the variable y by doing an opposite operation. It's a minus 1, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And then I'll just about have my answer there. I write it down. We have y equals 2x plus 7. And there it is. That's as far as we're going to end up going. That's in the slope-intercept form. So parallel lines mean same slope. Well, number 5 here is very similar. We're going to write an equation again in slope-intercept form, but it's going to pass through a point and be perpendicular to the equation that we have. So perpendicular, this word means something different. That means opposite sign. So the slope is opposite sign and reciprocal. So that's the big thing that we need to remember when we're dealing with the perpendicular, is that the slope has to be the opposite sign and reciprocal. So we're going to take the slope of the equation that we have. So remember, the slope is the number out in front of x. So negative 2/3. There's our slope. And so we're going to write that down. M here equals negative 2/3. But we don't want that slope. We want the perpendicular slope. So the one we're going to use has to be positive, because this one's negative. That's the opposite sign. And the reciprocal. So the reciprocal means you're going to turn that fraction upside down. So 3/2. That's what we're going to end up using. So we've got our slope. We've got our point. Let's plug it into that point-slope formula. Remember, it goes y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So we do that substitution. We've got y minus negative 2 equals the slope, which is 3/2, multiplied by x minus, and then the x value, which is 4. So I took the negative 2. That went in for y1. The 4 goes in for x1. The slope goes in for the m. Anytime you see a minus negative, change that right away to plus positive. And then distribute. Distribute that 3/2 over that subtraction. Well, when I do that, bring the problem up here. We've got a y plus 2 equals, and then this makes a 3/2 x. And then off to the side, you might want to try doing that multiplication. 3/2 times by negative 4 over 1. Watch that reducing there. 2 goes into negative 4, negative 2 times. When you multiply, we get negative 6, or minus 6. Well, from there, we just have one final step. We'll have our answer. Gotta subtract that 2 from both sides. And when I see the same sign, that tells me to add those numbers. So we get our answer. We've got y equals 3/2 x minus 8. And there it is, our answer. Well, those are the first 5. Part 2 will have the second 5.